Thank you for tuning in to watch or to listen to this message today. Wherever you are, at home, in your car, on your computer, on your phone, we're just excited that you're spending time with us. We are on a mission here at CRB to lead people to know and love Jesus. And so if you call this place your home, I encourage you to visit our Give page on our website, where you can find a few easy ways to faithfully support God's work here at the church, financially, through online giving. At CRB, we believe that love will save the world, and the best place to do that is in the local church. So if you live in San Diego or if you're visiting the area, we just want to invite you to come join us on a weekend, come hang out with us, and be a part of the family here. Enjoy the message.
My family is with me today. They wanted to come with me. To be honest with you, I wasn't sure how I'd feel coming back here. Every day, I think about what you said to me that day on the bridge. I've tried to live my life the best I could. I hope that was enough. I hope that at least in your eyes, I've earned what all of you have done for me.
James, Captain John H. Miller.
Tell me I have led a good life.
What?
Tell me I'm a good man.
You are.
So cool. I cry every time I see that, man. It's awesome. What movie was that? Anybody? Saving Private Ryan. Yeah, some of you, you saw that. You're like, was that one of those Jason Bourne movies? What was that? I remember that. It's about 19 years old, that film, but it's a beautiful film. I still remember where I was when I saw that movie. And there's just something about film, whether you're a Christian or not, that is so powerful, that speaks to the human condition. Some of us, you've made spiritual decisions watching films. Some of us, maybe even in this particular building, before it was a church, it was a movie theater, you made spiritual decisions watching Men in Black, I don't know. But there's just something about film for all of us that speaks to the human heart, that frames life for us, that reminds us of things that are beautiful. And so for the next few weeks, we're in this series together called CRB. We're starting today, CRB at the movies. And I just a quick survey, how many drama film people do we have? How many of you love to sit back and watch a good drama film? Anybody? Yeah? Come on, guys. I know you're lying. I know some of you guys are like, no way, man. Western, that's where it's at. How many of you just will admit romantic comedy? Romantic comedy is your thing? Anything with Matthew McConaughey? I mean, you're just a sucker. Okay, cool. How many of you, you love a good documentary? You could watch Netflix documentaries all day. These are all the smart people. That's awesome. Okay, where are all the weird people? Horror film people? Horror film people? Okay, a few of you. There's some sci-fi. Any sci-fi? Like that's your thing? 2 hands up. You calling a field goal? That's awesome. There's something about film for all of us, whether it's a Western, whether it's a romantic comedy, that just speaks to the human heart. I was even talking with a friend this last week, and he was talking about some circumstances in his life. In the middle of the conversation, he just sort of throws his hands up and starts quoting Forrest Gump. And some of you, you've done that before. Life is random, and you find yourself trying to make a choice, and you've said before, well, life is like a box of chocolates, like Forrest said. You know, you never know what you're going to get. In fact, some of you, you're not quite sure the difference between things that Forrest Gump said and things that the Bible says. I mean, it gets really blurry. And I quote Dumb and Dumber regularly. I don't know what that says about me. Harry can tell you, at least once a week, I look at him and say, we're really doing it, Harry. The theology of Lloyd Christmas is just in my heart. And so I love film. There's something powerful about film. And some of you even wrote me this last week or asked me in the hallway, so what are we doing for the next few weeks? Are we just watching movies in church? You're like, what is that about? We're not just watching films in church. We are going to read the Bible in a few moments. But what we're talking about is I think the most powerful truths in some of the most powerful films, the reason they're so powerful to us is because they point us to deeper spiritual truths. And there's an overlap between powerful movies and powerful scenes that we see and powerful truths in God's Word. And so what we're interested in for the next few weeks is that interlock, that overlap between powerful truths in God's Word and powerful moments in some of our favorite films. The entire film, spoiler alert, of Saving Private Ryan, is about Saving Private Ryan, that's him at the very end, coming to the realization that a significant sacrifice had been made for his life. And at the core of the Jesus story, at the core of the New Testament, at the core of the Gospels, whether you've ever read the Bible or not, at the core of the Scripture is this powerful truth that a sacrifice has been made for your behalf and for mine. And I love that film because it just speaks to the power of sacrifice and the connection between sacrifice and greatness. And it's what we celebrate at July 4th. In fact, many of us in this room, you served in the military. Many of us, you've had family members, friends that paid the ultimate price. And I believe for those of us that have served, for those of us that have lost family members, I mean, you know this is true, that sacrifice, the sacrifice that many of us have made, it's connected to greatness, that there's a greatness that is found and is connected to sacrifice. And at the core of the American story, what we celebrate at July 4th is at the core of the Jesus story, that sacrifice, what Jesus invites us into as followers of Jesus, is sacrifice, but it's sacrifice that's connected to greatness. If you have a Bible this morning, you can open it to Mark chapter 8. Mark chapter 8, if you don't have a Bible, you can follow along on the screens. If you want to download the CRB app, that's a great place to follow along as well. Mark is one of my favorite books of the Scriptures. It's the second book of the New Testament. Most scholars will tell you it's probably the first of the Gospels that were written. And Mark is 16 chapters long. Obviously, we kind of went in, translators went in and put the numbers in later. But essentially, everything changes about halfway through the story. The first 8 chapters of the book of Mark, nobody knows who Jesus is. Everybody's really fuzzy on the question of who Jesus is. His family, they don't know who he is. Nobody knows that he's the Messiah. Nobody knows that he's the Son of God. They think he's a miracle worker. They think, well, maybe he's, Elijah from the Old Testament, kind of come back, reincarnate. I mean, everybody's fuzzy on the question of who Jesus is. In fact, in the first 8 chapters of Mark, the Scriptures say that only the demons are the ones that are aware of who Jesus is. But all that's going to change in Mark chapter 8. And the next 8 chapters, after Peter stands up, Peter's the disciple of Jesus, the follower of Jesus, and he stands up and he says, I know who you are. He's sitting in a field with Jesus and the disciples one day in a town called Caesarea Philippi, and he says, hey, I know who you are. You're the Son of God. You're the Messiah. And this is the first time that the disciples recognize who Jesus is. They see him and they know what he's come into the world to do. And this opens up a different tone, a different sort of structure of the story of Mark, where all of a sudden following Jesus, it's going to be connected to sacrifice. It's going to be connected to something beside just miracles and turning water into wine and healing the sick. And Mark chapter 8, verse 31 is where we're going to start together. And essentially, there's 3 different scenes that I want us to take a look at. And what's so beautiful and powerful about Saving Private Ryan is essentially the same invitation that Jesus has for his disciples. Sacrifice is connected to greatness. And in this particular story that we're going to look at in the Bible, essentially what's happening is Jesus is going to tell his disciples what's going to happen. I'm going to the cross. The disciples are not going to understand it. And Jesus is going to come back and explain what it means. And this happens 3 different times: Mark 8, Mark 9, and Mark chapter 10. Now, the writers of the scriptures, by the way, they're brilliant, they're crafty, they're creative how they tell stories. And these 3 scenes are bookended by 2 separate miracles of people receiving physical sight. And this is Mark's way of telling you Jesus has come not just to bring physical sight for those that are blind, but spiritual sight for the disciples, for all of us. That when we see who he is, something changes and we become connected to greatness. Mark chapter 8, verse 31, Peter has just announced, "You are the Messiah." And Jesus says this, verse 31, "He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and after 3 days he will rise again." They've never heard this before. They've left their families, they've left their jobs. They're 3 years into a journey of following Jesus, and all of a sudden, he kind of drops this bombshell on them. So of course, it says he spoke plainly about this, and Peter, the disciple who said, "You're the Christ," takes Jesus aside and begins to rebuke Jesus. How many of us have read this before? And you're like, what is going on with Peter? Get behind the boss man. Just follow along. But for Peter, he's left his job, he's left his family, he's hitched his wagon to this particular truck, and he's going, "Are you driving us off a cliff here, Jesus? What is happening?" And for Peter, he signed up for revolution. He signed up to change the world. He signed up for greatness. He did not sign up for sacrifice. And when this particular, when Jesus says, "I'm going to the cross," I mean, of all things, to connect his mission to the cross, Peter's going, wait a second, a dead Messiah is a failed Messiah. I'm not so sure I want to be a part of this anymore, is essentially the implication. And it says this, verse 33, "But when Jesus turned and looks at his disciples, he rebukes Peter. And he says to Peter, 'Get behind me, Satan,'" which I think is a bit harsh. Just try that with your kids. I know we just finished a parenting series, but on your way home today, your kid wants to go somewhere else. You want to go to Denny's. He wants to go to, just get behind me, Satan. That's Denny's anyway. Sorry, that was a terrible joke. Oh man, I'm getting letters. It says this, "Get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." So he says to Peter, you get behind me, Satan. You don't have in mind what God is up to in the middle of this sacrifice that is going to be made. And so for this particular moment, it's a bizarre thing, get behind me, Satan. But essentially, what Jesus is referring to is the desert scene, the wilderness scene, where Jesus is tempted by the devil on 3 separate occasions. Before Jesus does a miracle, before he launches his ministry and starts healing people, teaching, he goes into the wilderness, into the desert, and the devil, the scriptures say, tempts Jesus on 3 separate occasions. And the essence of all those temptations are essentially this: circumvent pain and hardship and go straight to glory. If you're really the Son of God, if you're really the Messiah, circumvent pain, circumvent hardship, and go straight to glory. And so for Jesus to say this to Peter in this particular moment, he's essentially saying, Peter, we are not going to circumvent pain. We're not going to circumvent sacrifice. We're going to go to the cross. We're going to go through the cross to get to resurrection. He's essentially saying, Peter, if you want to learn how to dance at a wedding, you got to learn to weep at a funeral. Greatness is connected to sacrifice. You can't have greatness if you don't have sacrifice. And so he's inviting in this moment, not just Peter and the 12, but he opens up an invitation to anybody who wants greatness, anybody who wants to brush against greatness in their life. He says, this is the pathway, this is the way to get there. And he connects it to sacrifice, not just for Peter and the 12, but for anybody in 2017 who wants to follow Jesus. He says this, then he calls the crowd, verse 34, along with his disciples and said, whoever, which is all of us, wants to be my disciple, which means if you want to follow Jesus and not just, believe in Jesus, not just check a box, not just pray a prayer, not just arrange the spiritual furniture in your brain the right way, but following Jesus day in, day out. Whoever wants to follow me must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life, Jesus says, will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. Jesus is a Middle Eastern teacher. This is a Middle Eastern phrase. It's sort of a play on words. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, Jesus says, and yet forfeit their soul? Or what can one give in exchange for their soul? And Jesus says in this moment, if you want to follow me, Peter, take up your cross. If you want to follow me in 2017, take up your cross. Lose your life so that you can begin to have and receive your life. If you want greatness, if you want to take hold of greatness, you have to let go of your life. And the cross in this particular culture is not flowery religious metaphor. The cross was not something people wore in gold around their neck or they hung in church buildings. The cross is the worst execution device that has ever been invented in human history. It's a punishment reserved for the worst of the worst criminals. Essentially, you would strip somebody naked, beat them within an inch of their life, nail them to 2 boards, and let them just bleed to death. That was essentially what the cross was. And so the shock of Peter in this moment is justified to connect this to a cross. That's not greatness. That's a symbol of defeat. That's a symbol of weakness in their mind. But Jesus is saying, if you want to follow me, it's about losing something so you could essentially begin to take hold of something. Lose your life so you can begin to receive your life. Maybe another way to say it is this. Following Jesus, this is true for all of us. Following Jesus is going to cost you something. Not just believing in Jesus, not just praying a prayer, but deciding in your life to follow Jesus. I mean, many of us in this room, you could stand up and tell the story. Following Jesus for you at your job, for you and your family, I mean, there's a cost to that. It's a difficult thing in many ways to follow and become a follower of Jesus. But deciding to not follow Jesus could cost you everything. And so as followers of Jesus, we say, well, there is a cost to this, and it's not just a cost that we pay, but in the process of sacrifice and letting go, we begin to receive greatness. There is a beautiful kind of life that we begin to take hold of in the process. A couple of weeks ago, I was speaking on a similar idea in our student ministry, our high school ministry. And as I was talking through this idea of losing to take hold of the new, afterwards, there was this girl, probably 17 or so, that came up to me and she said, I have this sense that if I'm going to trust Jesus, if I'm going to follow Jesus, I want it to be real. I don't want to just say it. And I know that if I'm going to do that, there's some friends in my life that I can't have anymore, that they're just, they're not bad people, but they're bad for me. And this idea that it's hard, it's difficult. I've known them since elementary school, but I need to let go of these particular friendships if I want to begin to receive this new thing that Jesus is doing in my life. We just finished a parenting series, a series on raising up the next generation. For many of us, maybe it's what Joel talked about last week, carving out space to be fully present, not just so that you're present, but so that the Spirit of God is present in you and through you when you're with your kids. That there's a cost to that, that some of us, you've lost promotions. I mean, you have just carved out space from your job so that you can be fully present with your kids. And because in the process of that sacrifice and letting go of title or position or a certain amount of money to carve that out in your life and in the rhythm of your schedule, you have this belief you're taking hold of something else. That sacrifice is connected to greatness. I was talking with a friend a couple of weeks ago, and he said, my wife and I, we have this sense God's calling us to potentially move to some kind of a crazy stepping out, a different life, a whole new way of trusting God. We're not quite sure where, we're not quite sure how, but we have this sense, a restlessness. And in the middle of this, what does this mean? It's a sacrifice, letting go to take hold of something else, trusting God. There's always a letting go, but it's not just a cost for the sake of losing something. It's losing so that you can begin to receive something else. Maybe another way to say it is we have this tendency to white knuckle things, don't we? People, places, things, jobs, positions, titles. We want to white knuckle and hold on. But the problem is God can't put anything new into a closed fist, can he? And it's not until we release and let go of our life, Jesus says, that you begin to take hold of and receive this new life, this new thing God wants to do in your midst, in you and through you. Let go, sacrifice, greatness is what you begin to take hold of. Now, the disciples, of course, are fuzzy on what all this means. Mark chapter 9, you see this again. The disciples are trying to figure out what is Jesus talking about. We look at the story from the other side of history. We know cross, resurrection. They have no context for that. And they're trying to piece it all together. Mark chapter 9, verse 30, one chapter over, it says, they left that place and passed through Galilee. Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were because he was teaching the disciples. He said to them, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. I love this part. But they did not understand what he meant and were afraid to ask him about it. In other words, he called Peter Satan. I think I'm going to keep my mouth shut, is sort of between the lines. They came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, what were you arguing about on the road, the 12 disciples? I love this. But they kept quiet because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest among the 12. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, you idiots, just kidding. Anyone who wants to be first must be very last and the servant of all. It says he takes a child among who was there, whom he placed among them. He takes the child in his arms, and he said to them, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who has sent me. And so he takes this child in his arms, and often this scene gets painted. Some of us, maybe in your grandparents' house, I mean, you remember this image of Jesus, he's holding a child in one arm, maybe like a goat in the other, and he's got a bathrobe on and Clairol hair, and it's just sort of kinder care Jesus. Just sort of that nice image. That's not exactly what's going on here. Jesus takes this child into his arms essentially as a sermon prop. A child in the first century world has no rights. They have a 40% fatality rate for children in the first century world. Children are insignificant. And he's essentially saying, if you want to become great, you have to become gloriously insignificant like this child. And he's not dismissing the notion of greatness. He's redefining the idea of greatness. That greatness is not found in position or title or climbing the caste system of life and achieving a particular rank. Greatness is not found in being served, but serving. Greatness is found in the process of humble sacrifice. And he's not dismissing the notion of greatness. But for all of us, he redefines the essence of what greatness is and how greatness works. It's connected to humble sacrifice. That's what Saving Private Ryan realizes in that moment, the greatness of Tom Hanks' character, the humble sacrifice that was made. This is the essence of greatness. One of the things I love about Jesus, this is true whether you're a Christian or not, that before Jesus, the idea or the ethic of humility, it did not exist. It's normal in our culture to assume that there be humility in a leader, that there be humility in your attitude or the way that you talk to people. And we just assume that. And, even if you're not humble, I mean, in our culture, you have to fake it. I'm the most humble person in the room. I mean, that's just normalized in our culture. But before Jesus, you do not see leaders on the world stage trying to appear as humble. Everybody came to be served, not to serve. Before Christ, in the example of the cross, the idea of a humble servant, the idea that would be lifted up as an example or an ethic for the world, for the first, the bit of human history, I mean, that just does not exist. Christ literally from the cross, whether you're a Christian or not, introduces the ethic of humility and leadership as a principle or as a reality. It's the first time it really appears in the world. And essentially what Jesus is saying from the cross is this is what greatness looks like. Humble sacrifice. I did not come to be served, but to serve. This is greatness redefined in the presence of Jesus. Sacrifice is always connected to greatness. And the disciples, of course, are still fuzzy on what this means. And you see this again in Mark chapter 10, one last scene in this story. It says they were on their way, verse 32, the next page over, up to Jerusalem, which in Jerusalem is where the crucifixion is going to take place. It's where the resurrection takes place. So they're headed towards Jerusalem. With Jesus leading the way, it says the disciples were astonished while those who followed were afraid. Of course they were. Again, he took the 12 aside and he told them what was going to happen to him. He says, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man, that's me, will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They're going to condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. And 3 days later, it says he will rise. Then James and John, who were 2 of the 12 disciples, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, I love this. We want you to do for us whatever we ask. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus said. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. Talk about missing the point. But I have a feeling if it was me, it would have gone the same way. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with? He's referring to the cross. I love this, verse 39. We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. This is a direct reference to Mark chapter 15, just a few pages later. When Jesus is on the cross, Mark lets you know that at the right and at the left of Jesus, as he's hanging on the cross, are 2 criminals that are insignificant. You don't know what you're asking, James and John. When the 10 heard about this, the other 10 disciples, what James and John had requested, it says they became indignant with James and John. I think because they hadn't had the opportunity to speak to Jesus first to make the same request. Jesus called them and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. That's how power and greatness works. They lord it over them. He says, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Verse 43, this is the definition of greatness for disciples. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be last or slave of all. For even the Son of Man, he's talking about himself, did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. The sacrifice made by Jesus is for greatness. He says greatness has been redefined right here in front of your eyes. And now greatness is going to be modeled from the cross so that in 2017, the whole world has a picture of what greatness looks like, humble sacrifice made for the benefit of others. I know for some of us, you go, what do you do with that? I mean, it's a nice idea, but I think if you boil it down, if you missed everything else I said, here's essentially the point. The cross, this is what Jesus is saying to the disciples. The cross is not just the place where Jesus dies. It certainly is that. But the cross is also the place where we come to die with Jesus. The cross is not just the place where Jesus laid his life down and we celebrate what happened at the cross. We certainly do celebrate, and it certainly is the place where Jesus laid his life down. But for Jesus, he's saying, if you want to follow me, the cross isn't just where I die, it's where we all come to die and lose our life, let go of it to receive it. I know for some of us, you go, especially if you're new, you're going, what are you talking about? Is the popcorn poisonous? I mean, what is that? What does it mean we're going to lose our life? I mean, it's just bizarre. We can think of it this way. I think for all of us, whether you're a Christian or not, we all have a throne at the center of our heart. Every single one of us in this room. And your tendency and my tendency is I want to be the one who sits on the throne of my heart. I want to be the one who makes decisions about where I go, how I spend my money, what the dreams for my life are, what I want to accomplish. I want to be the one that makes all the decisions about how I talk to people, how I treat people. I want to be the one who sits on the throne of my heart. And when you decide to follow Jesus and not just believe in Jesus, there's a difference. But a day in, day out, I'm trying to follow Jesus and make a decision about what it means to follow Jesus in this context, in this decision, in this relationship. It means we get off the throne of our heart. We lose our ability to be in control of our life. And we say, God, I want you to sit here. And following Jesus, and many of us in this room, you can stand up and tell the story, is a day in, day out, letting go of the throne, letting go, dying to your need and desire to be in control of your life. And that's not a one-time thing. It's a day in and day out thing. For me, I'm constantly playing musical chairs with God. I want to be the one who sits here in control. But it's in the letting go that we begin to receive the new. We begin to discover God doesn't put new things in closed fists. It's in the release that we receive. It's in the sacrifice that greatness can begin to be ours. We decrease and he increases in the process. For some of us, you go, oh, how does that flesh itself out in life? Maybe for some of us today, I mean, it's just a first-time decision to follow Christ. I mean, essentially, if you just boil down what it means to be a follower of Jesus or pray a prayer, invite Jesus into your life or become a Christian, there's a lot of spiritual, language that gets attached to that. But essentially, you could think of it this way. Becoming a Christian is just getting off the seat and inviting God to sit here. And it's not the end of a journey. It's the beginning of a lifetime of saying every day, I want to decrease so that you can increase in my life. And the more you decrease and the more he increases, greatness becomes available. For some of us, it might be friendships. That's not just a teenager thing. That's an all of us thing. And if you're going to follow Jesus, and if you're going to be serious at this stage of your life with this, set of circumstances and this set of, moments of life, if you're going to follow Jesus, there's some people in your life that just don't need to be on your inner circle. And you need to let go, and it's in the letting go, and it might be joining a small group and finding friends here at CRB and getting connected to people that can help you get off the throne of your heart and allow Christ to sit here. You can go to the groups kiosk and find out more about what it means to be in a small group and have the right people in the inner circle. And it's in the letting go that you receive. And it's not that they're bad people, but they might just be bad for you right now. For some of us, it might be a Herculean sort of sacrifice that God's calling you to make. There might be a move. There might be a sense of God's doing something in me. God's doing something in our family. And we don't know what it is yet, but we know we're being called to let go of something. And we have this sense that greatness is on the table. If we could just let go of whatever it may be that God's inviting us to take hold of. It might be a risk. It might be to adopt through one of our ministries here at the church. And some of us, you're praying through that and going, God, but life is so perfect the way it is. And God's saying, if you let go, you'll begin to receive something far greater than comfort. For some of us, it might be a Herculean. I know for Roseanne and I, it feels like every few years, there's some Herculean effort of sacrifice. Not so that we can earn favor with God, but we can decrease and in the process of letting go, find that God increases in becoming Lord over our life. I think for all of us, not just in massive ways, but day in, day out, it's getting off the throne of our heart. It's losing so that we can receive. I know a couple weeks ago, I had a conversation with a friend and it was frustrating. And I hung up and I was bitter, I was angry. And it was a week later, it was a couple days ago, I was driving around and I was still having a conversation with that person in my mind. Do you ever do that? You have imaginary conversations with people of how the conversation should have gone? Tell me I'm not the only crazy one in the room. Have you ever noticed you always win those conversations? Never quite works out that way in real life. But as I was driving around, I just had this sense, it was like God was saying, this isn't about them, this is about you. And you need to forgive them. They don't even know you're angry. This is about you. And you need to forgive. And you know what's so difficult about forgiveness? Is when you decide to forgive somebody, big, small, whatever area of life it is, You have to lose your right to be repaid. And when you decide to forgive someone, you have to let go of your desire and your right that you feel is your right to be repaid for what they did that was wrong. And it's in the losing your right to be repaid that you begin to receive something beautiful, and you brush against greatness when you forgive. A couple of weeks ago, Rosanna and I, we were talking about taxes, which is always a fun conversation. And the conversation shifted away from taxes to generosity. And what kind of people do we want to be? And the sense that God's calling us not just to decrease so that he can increase in sort of spiritual, metaphorical terms, but in financial terms. How do we decrease so that God increases his glory, his presence in our life, not just in words, but in finances, so that we're generous? And in that conversation, many of us in this room, you can stand up and tell this story as you've given to this church or you've given to various ministries, that when you give away, when you hold your finances, when you hold your possessions like this, that in the process of letting go, you receive something far greater. And in the process of letting go and giving away, you let go of your right to be selfish. And you receive something in that moment. Many of us in this room, you can stand up and tell the story that it's in the giving that you're doing the getting, because you receive something. You brush against greatness when you're generous because you've lost your right to be selfish. It seems like every couple of days, I have to apologize to somebody for something. If I'm really honest, it's about every couple hours. I have to apologize to somebody for something. And it's hard every time. Anytime I say I'm sorry, I apologize to my kids, apologize to Roseanne. I mean, it's just constant. And anytime I say I'm sorry, it's always a mental struggle. It's always a fight. And the reason is because when I say I'm sorry, this is true for all of us, we let go of our right to be right. And especially as guys, that's a difficult thing to do, to let go of your right to be right and admit that you're wrong. But it's in the process of saying you're sorry. It's in the process of acknowledging you're wrong and letting go of your right to be right that you and I brush against greatness. It's in the letting go that we receive. This, Jesus says, is the way of the cross. Anybody from anywhere can brush against greatness and become great. But it's sacrifice in small ways and large ways that we begin to receive the new thing that God wants to do in our life. Let's pray together this morning. In a few moments, we're going to sing, ask God to help us see. But Spirit of God, I just pray in this moment, help us see you. Before we sing it, God, I just pray, Spirit of God, would you give us eyes today to see how the disciples saw? You were inviting them into something that they were fuzzy on what it meant. I think all of us get really fuzzy on what it means because it's hard. It feels like we're losing. And allow us to see there's a beautiful trade that you're inviting us into. Lose so that we can gain. Let go to receive. Stop white knuckling so we can take hold of something more beautiful. God, I pray for somebody, maybe for the first time, they need to let go of their life. And at the end of the day, if they were honest, they would say, I don't make a very good king in my heart anyway. And would they invite you to be the one who sits on the throne of their heart? God, for some of us, it might be a risk, a job. It might be a whole new way of living, recalibrating their calendar, their finances. And it's scary because it's hard. It's easier just to ignore your voice. But Spirit of God, I pray for us as individuals. I pray we're the kind of church that understands this. As individuals and as a church, what it means to release so that we can be a blessing to others. Letting go so that we can be receiving greatness. God, would we decrease so that you increase, Jesus? Pray that over all of your sons and daughters today. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let's sing together.